Hi, I'm Craig, and I help veterans go from feeling stuck and unseen after service to living with confidence, connection, and purpose so that they can thrive in civilian life and relationships.
Hey, vets and families, welcome to Royal Rock, where we help you reclaim your purpose, strengthen your relationships, and live royally and live well. In today's video, we're going to talk about total disability, individual unemployability. That's TDUI, and it allows a veteran to be paid at the 100% disability rate, even though their scheduler combined rating is less than 100%. The core test of this rating is that the veteran must be able to secure or follow substantially gainful employment because unable to secure or follow substantially gainful employment because of their service-connected disabilities. We'll cover the schedular path governed by the 38 CFR 4.16 and extra-schedular path and forward the claim for special consideration if the veteran doesn't meet scheduler percentages. We're going to get into the video, but before I do that, I just want to say if you like what we're doing, if you appreciate the content that we're providing, tell a veteran, tell a friend, pass this along, like, subscribe to this video, to the channel, comment. It really helps the channel grow and it helps veterans get what they need so that they can claim the benefits that they deserve. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's look at 4.16, which would be the requirements for the scheduler path. For one service-connected disability, that single disability must be rated at greater or equal to 60% to qualify. That's in 4.16a. For two or more service-connected disabilities, at least one must be rated at greater than or equal to 40%, and the combined rating after the VA's combining rules must be greater than or equal to 70%. And that's also coming from the 4.16 alpha schedule. The regulation also contains a one disability rule. That means in some cases, multiple disabilities can be treated as a single disability. For example, the same extremity, same body system, common etiology for meeting the threshold. Non-service connected disabilities are disregarded when determining TDUI eligibility. Only the service connected disabilities count. 4.16 alpha is where we're getting all this information from. Marginal employment is not considered substantially gainful. Typically, if your earned income does not exceed the poverty level, you still may qualify. And so what they're saying is if your earned income does not is not uh, lower than that than the poverty level, then you can still apply for TDUI. You just have to meet certain specific requirements, and then there are even other requirements for specific areas of TDUI. For example, some people are only 70% service connected for disabilities, but because of their specific circumstances, they're paid at 100% for TDUI. So earned income plays a part. There's a whole application that you'll fill out to determine what that is. One disability exceptions and combining rules. And this is again directly from 4.16a. This regulation allows that certain groupings of disabilities may be treated as a single disability for the threshold requirement. And here is the list of the disabilities that can be counted that way. These are disabilities of one or both upper or lower extremities, including the bilateral fracture, disabilities from a common etiology or a single accident, disabilities within a single body system, whether that be orthopedic, neuropsychiatric, digestive, or other, and then multiple injuries incurred in action and multiple disabilities incurred as a prisoner of war. So the one disability exception comes when you have any of these situations going on. And I'll link a copy of 4.16 alpha, just as we always do on our videos, so that you can kind of get a feel of some of these disabilities that are exceptions to the one disability rule. One disability exceptions and combining rules continued. As a result, multiple ratings that might otherwise be separate may count together to meet the 60% single requirement. In other words, that single requirement greater than or equal to 60%, you can get multiple things to equal that requirement. This one disability concept is essential in borderline cases, especially when no single disability is rated at greater than or equal to 60%. So if you don't qualify for any of the other disabilities to be rated that high, you can still, by reason of other things, other service-related injuries that occurred, compensable injuries that occurred, you can still get TDUI when you combine those ratings and you're greater than or equal to 60%. Extra-schedular consideration, this is when you don't meet the numbers, okay? If a veteran does not meet the scheduler thresholds under 4.16 alpha, the rating board should refer the case to extra-schedular consideration under 4.16b. That means that the VA must evaluate whether, on a case-by-case basis, the veteran's impairments render them unable to maintain substantially gainful employment, even though the percentages are lower. Listen, what this is saying is that there might be a situation where you don't meet in 38 CFR Part 4 where there's all those criteria that go from 10 to 100%, in some cases some disabilities 70 or 80%, depending on what kind of symptoms you have. You may not meet one in that criteria, right? But let's say you have a lot of different disabilities, right, that are multiple, and your body as an overall, right, is impacted by that, then you can still have a case for TDUI. The VA just will review it on a case-by-case basis. They might say, because there are issues with the back, issues with the knee, issues with ankle, issues with all of those things. Even though you might be at 20% or below, or 30% for some, or 10% for others, they may aggregate that and say that he or she is not able to hold down regular employment, so therefore they meet the criteria for TDUI. And they do that on a case-by-case basis. So this is why it's so important to make sure you maintain all of your documentation for all of your records, so that if you ever run into a situation or a condition where that's the case, then you can definitely make sure that you make a case for TDUI. Extra schedular consideration, when you don't meet the numbers, the board must submit a full statement of the veteran's service-connected disabilities, employment history, education, vocational background, and all factors relevant to unemployability under 4.16 Bravo. The extra schedular path is discretionary, but is required to be considered in borderline or exceptional cases. It is discretionary for the VA, but when your case is so on the line, they've got to look at it. Basically, is what this particular statutory requirement is stating. They have to look at it. They have to look at all other factors as well. The M21-1 is the VA and VA's internal guidance, and we talked about that in the previous video. It's not binding law, but it is what the VA uses to determine and adjudicate cases. The M21-1 Adjudication Procedures Manual provides internal VA guidance. Remember, it's their own manual, internal VA guidance on developing and adjudicating TDIU claims, but it is not law. M21-1, Part 8, Subpart 4, Chapter 3 deals with individual unemployability claims development. And here are some other key provisions to know from the M21-1. Among its directives, all service-connected disabilities claimed to cause unemployability must be developed, meaning they've got to give you a chance in the development of that claim. Monitoring income rules when a veteran is in receipt of individual unemployability. This means that the VA tracks whether new earnings might disqualify continued TDIU. Let's say, for example, you are under TDIU and you get a new job, which makes more money, brings you above the certain threshold or income requirement for TDUI, then the incoming rules monitor whether or not you get to stay at 100% level, because now you're making more money. So that has to be reported under this particular criteria. The use of VA Forms 21-8940, application for increased compensation based on unemployability, and 21-4192, employment information as development tools. However, courts have held that the M21-1 is internal guidance. If the VA deviates from its internal procedures to the veteran's prejudice, that can be basis for appeal. So the M21-1 is something that um, the VA can't necessarily deviate from for the for the veteran's preference, because the courts have held up that that's the case, right? There are probably cases that have gone up all the way to the BVA, maybe even cases that have gone up to the Supreme Court that direct and determine how the VA can use its own internal guidance for these cases. Here's evidence and strategy to strengthen the TDIU claim. Now, I know you guys have kind of been looking for this. Oftentimes, when people watch these videos, they just want to know, hey, listen, Craig, what can I do to strengthen my claim? You know, in the midst of all of this other stuff, what is it that I can do to make sure that TDUI is, or TDIU rather, everybody says TDUI, but it's TDIU, is something that will be a chance for me to win. So, here's a few tips for evidence and strategy. Treatment records providing a nexus. Remember, we all talked about how the nexus is a connection between your current in-service injury, illness, or event and your military in-service injury or event and a current diagnosis. Um, current diagnosis of a current diagnosis and current symptomology, right? There has to be a link between those two things. Okay. Adequate treatment records must tie your service-connected disabilities to your functional limitations on work. For example, inability to stand, lift, or concentrate. Functional statements. And listen, if you guys want more on functional statements, functional impact statements, got a whole video on it, got a whole series on how these statements affect your activities of daily living. Go check that out on Royal Rock Wellness, Royal Rock Counseling and Consulting's YouTube channel. I not only did videos on it, but I also have free PDFs on 7 different ways to write your statements. So go check that out. Show in writing exactly how your conditions impair daily work. For example, fatigue, pain, flare-ups, inability to concentrate, absenteeism, and need for breaks. Lay statements, buddy letters from coworkers, supervisors, family that corroborate how your condition affects your ability to work. Vocational expert occupational testimony is especially helpful in complicated or borderline cases. Remember, when you're right up close, you don't have a 60% or above uh, um, condition to claim, but you're right on the borderline. You've got a lot of other things, and you have things that impact your ADLs, right? Borderline cases to opine whether there is any occupation you can do given your impairments. Okay. Employment and income history. You'll submit the VA form 21-8940 from the veteran to show your work attempts, terminations, and reasons you had to stop working. Now, here's something that you guys need to understand. Okay. Um, that form is going to have to be signed by your last employer, at least your last employer, I know. Make sure, this is why it's so important to make sure that you can secure that signature. The VA is going to want an authorized official who you work for, a supervisor, to be able to sign that information. And this is why, guys, it's so important to make sure you don't burn bridges, to make sure that you leave in good standing from jobs and so forth. And I know things happen. I understand that things happen. But if you have to leave a job under conflict, make sure you have a good reason somewhere provided in your late statements or somewhere in your personal statement as to what happened on that job and the reason why you had to leave. Okay, that's going to be super important. Avoiding denials based on quote unquote some work, even if you can perform occasional tasks or odd jobs, the VA may still grant TDIU if those jobs are marginal, i.e., below the poverty threshold, meaning you got a job, but you just don't make enough money to provide sustainable living for yourself and for your family. Address aggravation. If your service-connected disability worsened over time, show evidence of worsening and link that to decreased work capacity. Be proactive about internal VA errors. And if the VA fails to if the VA fails to follow M21-1 procedures, failing development, failing to request forms, that can be appealed. Here's some pitfalls. Right? The VA rejects because one disability alone does not meet 60%, and the board fails to consider the one disability rule. You must explicitly argue that rule. Another pitfall is focusing only on ratings rather than actual functional impairment. Listen, we talked about this. Don't just focus on that particular rating. Focus on how it affects your daily life and your functionality. You need to show how your conditions prevent you from working, not just that they are severe. Another pitfall is underutilizing vocational expert opinions. If you get somebody to write an opinion or say an opinion for you, in tough cases, that testimony can tip the balance. Another pitfall is exploiting some employment to deny even a little part-time or odd-time job does not necessarily preclude TDUI if it's marginal. Again, always another tip is always include full employment history, be honest, reasons for leaving work, especially due to disability, and supporting documentation. If you don't meet the schedule threshold, insist on extra-schedular referral under 4.16b. The VA is obligated to consider it. Another tip is to monitor for income changes. If ordered, the VA may periodically review for earned income above the poverty threshold. And another tip is to engage a VA accredited attorney or veteran services organization. Even good claimants get denied due to procedural missteps. Here's a final reminder for you guys, okay? While the regulation in M21-1 set the standards, the decision will often turn on how well you document the functional impact of your disabilities and tie them to the inability to maintain substantially gainful employment. Remember, they're always going to tie it to your ability to be able to maintain work. So it's important, as we always say on this channel, it's your claim, it's your story, it's your responsibility and opportunity to tell it. So you got to be clear, be concise, be brief, but also be very detailed on how these things affect your life. I think if you do that, you'll be perfectly fine. And if you gather all your information, you can get and claim a TDUI claim.
Listen, I want to thank you for watching. If this video helped you, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Help us get the word out. Help us grow the channel. Help us get more veterans involved in taking control and taking ownership of their claim so that they can get the benefits that they deserve. Remember, your story matters. The history of your time with the military matters, and it should be honored as such. And remember, always live royally and live well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.